what party you represent?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Michael Breslin and I'm standing for the Scottish National Party. First of all, I'd just like to thank Dave for organising the hustings. I've lived in Dunoon and Ellen and now Toward for a total of over 34 years. And somebody once said to me that maybe if I stay another 34 I might be a local, so I hope that's true. In all the time I've worked in Argyll, all of the jobs that I've had, I've covered the whole of Argyll and Bute. So I know the people, the issues, the geography very well. I'm currently the principal of Argyll College, and I'm proud to say that I've overseen the college from its creation, from nothing to a business that turns over £3.5 million a year. That business employs hundreds of local people right across Argyll and Bute and Arran, and has been profitable for every year of its being. And we've reinvested those profits back into the Argyll community, invested in people, in our curriculum, in premises and equipment, and in environmental benefits. So I'm standing for election for two main reasons. One, I believe I'm capable on a personal basis, and I also am standing because I believe in the SNP policies. I think that I've got a strong track record over a long period of time, from working a long number of years ago for the local authority, then for the local enterprise company, and now the college. I support the SNP policies for the Scottish local government elections. These are the national ones. For example, the continued freeze on council tax, the retention of the small business bonus scheme, which gives lots and lots of small businesses rates relief, the additional police, etc. At a local level, my priorities are to see a far more open and democratic local authority. I want to see a major improvement in our primary schools, but I also want the users of the schools to have the final say on what shape that improvement takes. I want to work with the Scottish Government to resolve the ferry situation, which is widely recognised as being unacceptable. I was a member of the Cowell Ferry Services Detention Committee in the early 80s, and I was one of the first members of the more recent Ferry Action Group. I will continue to work with everyone on the ferry issue until we achieve the very best possible solution for Dunoon and its people. I just want to say a little bit more about the schools issue, because what we intend to do if we gain control of the local authority and form an administration with others, it will need to be with a number of other parties. We will review the school situation in Dunoon, and what we mean by that is we'll establish the facts and verify the costs, examine and cost any feasible alternatives, including the refurbishment of the three existing schools. We'll inform everyone of what we find. We'll make a recommendation based on what we find. And lastly, we'll let the parents, carers and staff of the three schools make the decision. And if we possibly can, we'll involve the parents of the children from babies to 4-year-olds who will be the future customers and users of the school. We think that's democratic and fair. Lastly, I want to find even more money to upgrade our roads from their current third world state. It is noticeable that there has been additional activity in the roads very recently, but we need to spend much, much more, and we need to try and find a way of working with the SNP government to obtain more money. I believe that it's a time for change, a change of approach, a change in direction, and the introduction of some badly needed new blood to Argyll and Bute Council. Thank you for coming along this evening.
Gentlemen, my name is Dick Walsh and I'm the independent candidate in the Ward 7 elections. And I'm seeking your support in the forthcoming election, and I'm doing that because I feel passionately about the quality of local government services to you. I've got the experience, I've got drive, I've got enthusiasm, and I've got ambition to work hard on your behalf. And I will continue to work in a way that is informed, is positive, constructive, and I will continue to strive for the best outcomes for you, our communities. I'm approachable and I'm in regular contact with most of my community and have been for the last 32 years. And with your continued support, I will continue to ensure that the services that are provided by the Council are quality, are relevant, are efficient and are effective, and are delivered on a value for money basis. Over the last 5 years, I think it's fair to say that we've seen unprecedented change and uncertainty following the uncertain economic background, and with that the uncertainties around the financial settlements to local government. We've recognised that efficiencies alone could not resolve the gap that was building because of the demands on expenditure and the demographic changes. And what really needed to happen was real and transformational change. That transformational change was attacked through a process of service reviews. And those service reviews were widely consulted with you, our communities. We looked at the question of duplication, we looked at extravagance, and we looked at waste. And we worked very hard to ensure that all of that, where it existed, was removed from council services. Since the period 2011 to 2014, we'll have removed some £72 million from the council's expenditure and a reduction in 500 jobs. We need to recognise that councils provide services to people by people, so whatever we do has a significant human element that impacts on our communities. Throughout this period of change, I've always valued the importance of delivering relevant and quality services to our people, and we've been doing that through fairly detailed consultation. But my focus has been and will continue to be in protecting vulnerable people, delivering quality education, sustaining and improving our infrastructure and our transport, investing in our future in terms of economic development, not just the council itself, but with others. In my council budget that was presented and accepted in February, significant investment took place in all of our council services, in education, not only protecting the revenue expenditure and enhancing the service, but also providing some £45 million towards the capital investment in the school estate. Part of that includes the shared school campus, and I've no doubt we'll discuss that later on in the meeting this evening. Investment in early years through the Change Fund, the council will be contributing additional money, more than is expected from us by the government, in the Change Fund investments in early years, early intervention, and also in adult services. As was mentioned, we've invested significantly in our roads infrastructure. There'll be some £21 million spent over the next 3 years, and that's without detriment to any other service of the council. In housing investment, the creation of the Rural Housing Fund, and youth development, promoting a youth development service that will involve the youth. They'll be able to get involved in framing the service that will be important to them. And of course, tourism, a major provider in our community, not just in the promotion and the marketing of the area for tourism, but also servicing the visitors when they actually get here. And of course, clearly demonstrating that Dunoon is the ideal venue for hosting the major activity. I'm fairly clear that a lot of the problems that have bedeviled the council over recent years can be resolved if we actively and proactively progress some of the areas that I've actually homed in here. We need a very relevant and flexible planning policy that will help stimulate and encourage economic development, but also at the same time protecting some of the local important environmental areas of our community. So I have a fair bit of experience, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that on May the 10th I will continue to enjoy your support. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tony Miles. I'm standing for the Lib Dem in this ward. I've been living and working in Dunoon and Ellin for the last 30 years. I raised my family here. My children went to Ellin Primary School and to Dunoon Grammar School, and my grandchildren currently go to, they went to Toward and they now go to Sandbank. So I have, I think, a wide knowledge of bringing up a family here. I also ran a business from Ellin. I employed at one point about 13 people. We worked all over the world in a very specialised field, and it sort of put an Ellin on the map in that field. I've also participated in I was the chairman of the Dunoon and Cow Marketing Group for 10 years, and I represented that group on the Destination Cow and Dunoon initiative. I've also been on the Community Council. I was a member of the South Cal Community Council and its convener for a while until I left it last year. I lost my wife here in Dunoon, and so I have a first-hand knowledge of what having a hospice means to everybody. Now my election motto is going to be let's fix it for Dunoon, because I want to see more action, more things happening. Since 2007, when the last election took place, things have happened, but they've happened very slowly. They've tended to go backwards, I think, rather than forwards. So I want to see Dunoon and Cal with positive outcomes. I want to see change. I want to see things like the schools issue resolved. I want to see tourism, more tourism. We need to desperately sort out this CORD initiative, because we've been, again, that's been stagnating. We've had a period where we've had consultants after consultants after consultants, and we've made no progress. You come off the ferry and you still see slightly revamped Queen's Hall, but we're still looking at the same old scene that we've had for years and years and years, and we just don't seem to be able to get out of the bit on that one. On ferries, I am a member of the Dunoon and Gurok Ferry Action Group, and I'm fully supportive of their call for a ferry that's fit for purpose, a ferry service that provides vehicle transport between town centre and town centre. And I use the ferry quite often. I'm acutely aware of the fact that the two ferries we currently have are not really suitable for people who are disabled or find it difficult to move around. I think it's disgraceful that we've been landed with it. On roads and transport, yes, we have got £21 million allocated over the next 3 years, I think it is, for our roads. I think at last we've given up the idea of patching and patching and patching. It doesn't seem to be effective. The patches just evaporate and come back. So we do need to see a sustainable way of repairing our roads and keeping our roads up to a sensible standard. I was on Mull just over the weekend, and I have to say the roads were absolutely abysmal. Slightly worse than I think we have here in Dunoon. The important thing is that people will not come here. If we do not have a decent road structure, or a road that doesn't get closed because there's a landslide, or integrated transport such as being able to get off the ferry in Greenock and get a train, and vice versa, being able to get on a bus and go to these places, we won't have tourists come here. So we have to strive very hard to ensure that we improve things for tourism. I think then that's, oh yes, my care in the community obviously is something else that we really need to improve, we need to look at. I've mentioned the hospice. I think many of us are not actually happy with what's turned out as a hospice. I saw the old hospice working and I thought it was fantastic, and the people that worked there were absolutely fantastic. And I don't see the same now, and I'm very disappointed about that, and I really would like to see change there. I know it's down very much to the health service, but I think we have to push for change. After all, it's us that's providing, that they're providing the service for. So we've just got to get this sorted out. Right, thank you. Well, I think that's really all I have to say. I'm very much. I feel that I have an experience to go into the council chamber and make the point for Dunoon and for South Cal, and that's what I'd like to do with your help. And I'd like to fix things in Dunoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank Dave and also you for turning up tonight to give me the opportunity to speak to you about my candidature. My name is Mick Rice and I live in Blair Moor. I've lived there for 5 years, where I help run a small bed and breakfast business. However, before coming to this area, I lived in Birmingham for 40 odd years, and I was a councillor for 20 of those years, and in fact finished up as a member of the council cabinet. In addition to that, for most of my working life, I've been a full-time trade union officer campaigning on behalf of ordinary working people. But I do not ask you to vote for me because of my previous experience. I ask you to vote for me because I am a campaigner. And my goodness, I believe that Dunoon really does need a councillor who will campaign on its behalf. Because every day, when I go down to the ferry to take my wife, when I see her off in the morning to go to work, I see those bathtub boats swivelling around trying to take on passengers from the link span. We need to have proper vehicle passenger ferries that are not going to be taken off when there's the first adverse weather conditions. And we need to do something about it. We need to campaign about that to make sure that the Scottish Government comes up with the money to get proper boats for Dunoon. See, the fact of the matter is that our ferry service on this part of the Clyde is the equivalent, as far as I'm concerned, to the Forth Road Bridge on the other side of Scotland. And we've got a situation where, unfortunately, our Scottish Government is investing most of its capital in East Coast projects. Some of you may have heard of the amount of money they've been giving to Edinburgh to bring about the silence of the trams. But it is not simply that amount of money. It is also the billions of pounds that is earmarked for the new Forth Road Bridge. We need to make sure that we get funding into Argyll and Bute and into Dunoon. As you will know, there is 2.2 billion in the new Scotland Act, which is available to the Scottish Government. I want to make sure that Dunoon gets a fair shakedown from that amount of funding and that Argyll and Bute gets money as well. I am a member of the Dunoon Europe Ferry Action Group. In fact, I'm its membership secretary and treasurer, and I have been involved with it from the outset. And we shall continue to campaign with the community in order to make sure we get proper ferries for this town and for Kell. But it is not just ferries. We have a situation where it seems to me the Rest and Be Thankful ought perhaps to be renamed the Stop and Be Annoyed, because that's what happens in winter when there's a landslip. And it seems to me, therefore, that we need to make sure we get the funding to ensure that we have a covered road there so that we're not subject to that being closed during landslips. In relationship to the school campus in Dunoon, I do not support the idea of some mega campus and the idea of having 100 plus pre-5-year-olds in one location must be a teacher's and parents' nightmare. So I believe that we should have local schools within easy walking distance for parents and for children, and that bigger is not better. So I'm in favour of putting this back onto the drawing board and consulting with local parents about it. And let me say this, 60% of the funding for the new school campus has been proposed by the Scottish Government. They seem to have got the money to offer the council for that, but they don't seem to be able to find the money for the new ferries that we require. As a Scottish Labour candidate, we have no representation at the moment, not only in Dunoon, but right throughout the whole of Argyll and Bute. But we are not beholden to either the coalition government, so we won't be apologising for them, nor are we beholden for the Scottish Government, so we won't be trying to stick up for them against the interests of the people of Dunoon Ward. So can I say in conclusion, if you vote for me, you will get a campaigner that will campaign unceasingly, not only on your behalf, but with you. Because I do not believe that you should elect somebody and say, get on with it. You should elect somebody who will organise a campaign to get the community organised.
And no more. May want less. Okay, again, if you could just put your hand up and indicate who you want the question to be answered by. Sorry, is it the whole panel or is it?
I'd like to ask this of all the members of the panel that are seeking election. I use a ferry every day from June of last year, since we've only had the passenger-only ferries. as we've seen, a diminution of the quality of the journey, the reliability of the service, both for workers, students, commuters, shoppers, and indeed tourists. Now, you've all said how important it is. I want to know what you individually will specifically do to get a town centre to town centre ferry reinstated that is able to carry vehicles and passengers safely and frequently and is not cancelled at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, Carol? Well, I mean, I have to say I share the concerns that have been expressed. When you look at the adverse weather that we receive, when you look at mothers with babies and children walking long lengths to a ferry service, it's less than acceptable. On the 9th of December, I promoted a 3-point action plan as part of the discussions with the appropriate minister at the Scottish Government. That 3-point action plan is still live. The first point of that action plan was to improve the current arrangements for embarkation, disembarkation. It also agreed that something needed to be done about the 2 ferries, in particular the Alicat. The second point of that, as well as picking up the potential for removal of the Alicat, it looked at what could be done long term for the improvements for the shore facilities for ferries there. Because I think it needs to be noted, and Tony made reference to the Cord project that's been delayed, it's been delayed, it's been delayed, and that is the case. Because our plans for the waterfront and the pier were always predicated on what future shape the ferry service would be. And we have been very careful not to spend significant sums of money until that issue was resolved. We suggested the possibility of utilisation of the Saturn. Although it's not certificated, the certificate could be changed to allow a reduced crew. We also suggested the possible utilisation of the Carouse, because it was built to sail in the Clyde during the winter period, but it's never been tried and tested alongside the new link span in Brightwater. When it came to the town, the wooden pier was clearly unsuitable and the passengers were unhappy there. So what I will continue to do, as I've been doing for the last decade along with others, and that is to represent the case for a proper town centre to town centre ferry, vehicle and passenger service for the people of Dunoon. I think before too long, the operator of this service will be knocking on the government's door, asking them to do something about this service, because whilst we're receiving questionable figures about the reliability, there are issues about the usage. The contract provides a review for 15% reduction, and it's my understanding from the figures that we have that the usage reductions is around about 30%. This is vitally important for our community. It's about access and it's about connectivity, and we really need to get something done about this and fairly soon.
When I see the figures that Argyll Ferries puts up, when it says it's 98.5% success rate on journeys in the previous month, I begin to think I'm living in some sort of surreal world. Because how can that be the case when there's been so many cancellations? And what has come out is that they only put forward those journeys which have not been cancelled because of adverse weather conditions. Now, I've met Alex Neil, the Minister for Capital and Infrastructure, on behalf of the Dunoon Ferry Action Group, and I have to say that that is not a party political campaign. There are members of the SNP, independents and others there, and we are all working together to try to get the government in Scotland to do the decent thing. Having said that, I think that Alex may well come across with some support for us, because why would he set up a meeting with us, and we've got another one scheduled for the 28th of May, if at the end of the day he wasn't going to make some proposals? We do have the Saturn, which was, I think, a better service than what we've got now, lying idle in Rossneath, which could be used and brought back into certification. We asked the government to search the world for suitable vessels, and they passed that responsibility on to Cal Mack, who came back and said they couldn't find any. But in fact, our own Kenneth Barr, some of you will know from the Dunoon Community Council, found vessels in Japan which would potentially be useful. It is also the case, that that I believe that the council could go further. I think that the council could raise funds and underwrite a loan and say to the government that they're prepared to go halfway with them to get new ferries for the Dunoon route. Because unless we get that right, we're not going to get commuters living in Dunoon, and we're certainly not going to get tourists coming here to use our businesses. So I think that the council ought to be proactive as well, and I shall be campaigning on that. Because it does appear, Dick, there might be some spare money available if you don't go ahead with the school campus straight away.
I think Michael came in, was in, wanted to go first.
Well, everything that Dick said, I agree with entirely. So, I think it's fair to say that everything he said was accurate and fair, and I endorse that. A couple of things to remember about this. First of all, the arrangement that we've had since the early 80s, which I negotiated at the time because we were going to lose the service completely. The proposition was that we would be bussed to Western Ferries at that point from Dunoon Pier and then bussed from the other side into Gourock. And the proposition that was agreed in the early 80s was that we had a passenger service and that would be the bit that was subsidised and there was to be no subsidy on the car side of it. Now, over the years, that was always supposed to be the case and in practice it probably wasn't. So let's just bear that in mind. Secondly, the people of Dunoon did not support the Carmack vehicle service. And that's a fact. And thirdly, for whatever we get in the future, we need to remember that we cannot possibly subsidise the vehicle side of it. So whatever we do needs to satisfy that non-subsidy argument, because otherwise, others who are not present in this room will sue. And that is the situation. There's been threats over the years to take the government to court over the way in which Carmack apparently was using public subsidy for the vehicle side. So this is not a simple thing to fix, but I endorse what's been said here. We're all on the same side in this one.
Can I just clarify?
Sorry, wait, no, I'll come back to you in a minute. So, Tony?
Thank you. Well, I certainly endorse what Dick has said. We've had prevarication by successive governments. It's not just this current government. There have been prevarication right down the line. It's clear to me, and it's clear to all of us in this room, I'm sure, that the current ferry is not suitable, fit for purpose. I too travel on it about 3 times a week. I agree entirely with what the lady here has said. I feel very, very strongly for anybody that's disabled or finds it has difficult mobility, as Dick has said. There was some suggestion at one of the ferry meetings that I attended about pontoons. However, I think there's just another prevarication, because if you think about having pontoons sat off where the link spans are and on the corner of the point at Gourock, I think you have just as much problem with boarding the ferries via a pontoon in inclement weather as you currently have at the moment. At least you have a little bit of support from the breakwater. So this issue does have to be resolved. Maybe a short-term issue is to bring the Saturn back into service if it's not been robbed and pillaged and it can be certified. But I do call upon the government, the SNP government, to do what they promised. They did promise us 2 boats in 2007. And they have prevaricated and prevaricated and prevaricated. And we will not be satisfied in Dunoon until we have 2 proper, fit-for-purpose ferries that transport vehicles from town centre to town centre. And I know I speak for very many of you when I say that. And I will push as hard as I possibly can amongst all of the agencies, and this is, as Dick has again mentioned, this is not something that's going to happen if we fight and squabble about whose responsibility it is. It has to be a concerted effort by us all. That's you out there, it's the people on the council. Hopefully I'll be one of them, and hopefully we can resolve this issue. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, lady, can you
just
go
want to
back?
clarify a point of fact.
Sure.
The Ferry Action Group, actually under a Freedom of Information, got the accounts of the Carmack in the year prior to its closing down. And while, of course, there was subsidy on the passenger side, even with an hourly vehicle, passenger ferry moving backwards and forwards, finishing 8:15 on each evening, the car side actually made a profit that was unsubsidised. Not a large profit, but nevertheless a profit.
This gentleman was next, and then 2 people at that.
Thank you. Can I actually just have some positives in the ferry? I've been travelling to Europe for 11 years to work. I come from Dunoon. And that ferry has actually recently been the best ferry I've ever had. I've not been, I get the 10-8 ferry every morning, 5 days a week. I've not been late for work once. I get the Western ferry this year 6 times back. I got it 9 times back last year because the Saturns can't run in the mist. The Saturns stink because of the actual plugs that are coming up through the toilets in the morning. The CalMac staff were actually possibly the most ignorant staff I've ever met in my life. Those people actually say good morning to you, help people on and off. In 11 years I never saw a CalMac member do that once. 5 o'clock coming home, 5 cars was the average number of cars. And as a taxpayer, why should I subsidise it? I was at a concert at the Queen's Hall, excellent Queen's Hall, was getting stuff back in, to 11 o'clock, 10:30. Lots of people I know from the other side telling me, we're getting that ferry back. I'm a teacher, I don't have to go to the Western Ferry at 9 o'clock anymore. I can get that wee ferry home and be in my house, okay, for 9 o'clock. With the old ferry, I was at home at 11 o'clock at night. I never saw my own kids, because I was dealing with somebody else's kids till 9 o'clock. So the actual way, you all seem to be hoodwinked into the fact that this is the worst service you've ever seen in your life. It is not. If you bring back the Saturn, if you bring back something like that, or the absolutely idiotic people who said bring back one of the Western ferries, when you wouldn't have to stand up all the way across and back, okay, you would be nowhere. If you're going to bring back, by all means get a bigger passenger ferry. But Dunoon, if I was moving to Dunoon as a young couple with family, what would be your issues? There's 2 ferries going to Dunoon. If you're from Bute or Mull or Iona, you would think, wonderful, 2 ferries. One's a CalMac, one's a passenger ferry, one's a vehicle ferry. But if I was moving to Dunoon, I think that's okay. If I'm moving to Dunoon with a school of 700, what's going to put you off? You've still got these 2 ferries. As Mike said, a few years ago we wouldn't have had that at all. So think on a wee bit before you start ploughing money and resources into trying to get a big ferry back into that wee port down there. We do not need a car ferry to the centre of Dunoon. It is not needed. We need a passenger ferry only.
Okay, I think we've got the message. No, the lady, Lorna, you wanted to come?
Yes, I think if Michael, you're saying that there was leakage of subsidy from the passenger to the car, you have to prove that now. We've heard an awful lot of statements of those kinds of things from the SNP. You have to prove that because all the evidence is not that. If it's there, please prove it because we're rather tired of things being told to be illegal, etc. I think my question to you is, given the obduracy of the SNP, how you're actually going to do anything positively on this. We've heard about meetings with Alex and Neil, etc. We've got a ferries review, we've got the options appraisal of ferries, which looks like a setup. Both of those bodies did very poor work, were setups, etc. We need some more facts and we need some more actual concrete evidence, not vague statements. And I welcome when you can actually produce that evidence. I don't see some of the progress being made on the ferries. Meetings are a classic way of delaying things. We need actually more on the table than we've got at the moment.
Michael, do you want to come out?
Yes, I do, because it's not me who's making the allegation of the moving subsidies to CalMac. There's a competitor here who's made those allegations repeatedly over the years. Can I finish, please? And who bombarded CalMac repeatedly using legislation that doesn't apply to them, namely the Freedom of Information Act, in order to try and get information from CalMac about that. I'm not making the allegation. All I'm saying is that the allegation is being made. And everybody who's looked at CalMac's use of their accounts over the past 30, 40 years will tell you that they're the artists at the very top of the chain about moving overheads from one port to another in order to justify a case. My view, quite simply, is that the worst operator that we could get on the Dunoon route is CalMac. My view is that we really need a third party to do this. Not Western, not CalMac because that would provide true competition. However, that's going to be very hard to get, and all I'm simply saying is that there is nobody is more passionate a supporter of a Dunoon to Gourock ferry than I am, and I was one of the few in Dunoon who always used it with my car. However, I do agree that if we had a really first-class passenger-only vessel, we probably would not have had the furore that we've had. So, one last point, don't forget that when this route was tendered, nobody offered to run a vehicle service, and they could have done it. Nobody offered to do it. That's a fact.
That was because the tender was written completely around.
Can you don't finish? Have you finished?
Yep.
That was because the tender was completely shaped around.
Sorry, mate.
Only placed on that tender document were horrendous. There was the two-pay condition, which any private company would have found completely impossible to meet. Western Ferries tendered it, I believe, but I mean the cost to them would have been horrendous if they had to have employed 63 people made redundant by CalMac in Gourock, which is what Tupay would have insisted. So the whole tendering process was flawed. The tender was written around CalMac, and the Scottish ministers and the Scottish government knew damn fine that was the case.
Sorry, Mick wants to come in.
Yeah, I think...
Well, if you just let Mick come in, then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, Lorna said that it was maybe a classic way for the minister to have meetings, presumably in the hope that the head of steam that the Dunoon community has generated over this issue will somehow disappear. Well, let me say this. I don't think that Alex Neil is a charlatan, and I think he's meeting this in good faith. When I find out he isn't, you'll be the first to hear about it, because obviously I don't hold any brief for an SNP cabinet minister. But I'm prepared to work with whomsoever to try and achieve objectives on behalf of the Dunoon community. So that's the first thing. And in relationship to, why didn't they come forward with vehicle ro-ro ferries last year? I think you need to bear in mind that the tender was for a 6-year contract. Who is going to invest maybe £20 million in 2 new vehicle ferries when there's no guarantee they're going to have the contract for more than 6 years, and the payback time for borrowing that sort of money is a lot more than 6 years? That's why nobody else came in. And normally, of course, what happens is that the ferries, the capital is owned by Seamount, not even CalMac. They own the capital, i.e. the boats, the ferries, and then the other companies operate them. It would have been perfectly possible for the Scottish government to have bought new ferries and arranged for them and then said, that's the basis on which the tender is going out, you need to use the boats that we specify. Yeah. But they didn't do it. So I blame the Scottish government for not getting us out of the mess. I'm not blaming them for getting us in it, but not getting us out of the mess, and we need to do something to force them so to do.
Right, could this point out we've actually had 50...
of fact, the profit shown in respect of the vehicle carriage may have been manipulated by Caledonian McBrain. I would ask him if he is aware that the Scottish Government ministers are shadow directors of Caledonian McBrain, that both Caledonian McBrain and those ministers would be breaking the law if, in point of fact, they carried out such a deliberate manipulation. If he is aware that one of the big four
questions.
One of the big four auditing groups passed these accounts and passed specifically
you
that.
You have to ask a question. You've
right.
now raised about 4 and all sorts of things. Could you get to the point?
Right. The point is this. It is beyond dispute that this matter has been examined by the EU, who cleared the Scottish Government on the issue. It's been examined by PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers. Can Mr. Breslin tell me why he still considers that the government ministers and the directors of CalMac have behaved in a manner of questionable legality?
And it's others, a third party, have been alleging that CalMac have been doing precisely that for many years. That's what I said. I didn't say I said it. So, please listen to what I'm saying. We are on the same side here, so we shouldn't be getting upset over points of detail in this. The facts of the matter are simply this. This is a very difficult thing to resolve. Nobody would like it resolved more than me. All I'm trying to do is be pragmatic and realistic about it. That's all. And I just think we need to recognise it's an uphill battle, this. And it hasn't been handled well by anyone. But worst of all, it's been handled extremely badly by the appalling, incompetent civil service in Edinburgh. Because they are the culprits. At the Ferry Action Group meeting, I said that Brian Wilson once said famously that they act in two ways to do with ferries. One's in ignorance and the other's with mendacity. And he was a government minister at the time. So bear it in mind.
I would certainly agree with what you have said there. I would also point out that the third party, Western Ferry,
If we form an administration. What is inescapably correct about all of this, however, is the fact that the three schools in question are in a very poor condition. And so, you know, it may very well be that when you review it, it could be that the current proposition is the only feasible practical one. I do not know. I accept entirely that there's lots of opposition to it. And I recognise fully why people feel opposed to it. But nonetheless, we need to spend money one way or another, and it may not be practical to do everything that everybody wants. The people who can tell you the most about this, interestingly, are the Jannies. Speak to any of them in any of the schools, and they'll tell you how poor the condition is. So not wanting something is all very well.
Mike, they're not allowed to speak. They're employed by Argyll Group. They're not allowed to speak.
I didn't say who they were, but all I'm saying is that not wanting something isn't it's all very well not wanting something, but we need to find a way of wanting something, and something that's affordable. So, and the money, interestingly, the money that's coming from the Scottish Government for the current proposal will not necessarily be lost by any means if there's a delay, and it is not necessarily not available if there's another option on the table.
Well, that is not, I have not been told that. We have been told that the money is available solely for this proposal, and if this joint campus did not go ahead, the money was withdrawn. That is quite contradictory to what we've been told.
That's the first thing we've heard.
Okay, so can I just ask, there's a man here who might be able to answer that question.
Well, could I say I agree with Mike here that the three schools in question, despite significant investment over the years, they're crying out for investment. There's an issue about the environment within the buildings in terms of a modern environment required for education, for teaching and learning. I'm fairly clear in my position on it. If the community, the parents and the staff in Dunoon do not want the shared campus, then it is unlikely to go ahead, and I will not be supporting it. But that said, this is part of the Schools for the Future initiative. We were invited to put in a bid, and that's a clear process. The council's put £6 million on the table as part of its budget at the moment. As I understand the position, if the project in its current form does not go ahead, then the Schools for the Future element won't go ahead either, because it's a fairly detailed business process that requires revenue support to take it to a particular stage, and the capital to support the project. Now, what I'm saying here is that if the parents clearly do not want this, we will need to decide a way forward for this. We have three schools that's crying out for investment. Where do we put that money? We're talking about £6 million on the table, and what will that provide for us? Do we invest in St Mun's Primary School and replace that? Do we invest in Kim Primary School? Do we refurbish the schools? What will that refurbishment involve? How long will the refurbishment be? I've been in office and I have seen schools being refurbished for 3 and 4 years at a time, kids being educated in a building site. And I don't want that. My stated position in terms of education, I want our children to be happy during their period at school, because if they're happy, they'll perform, they will progress, and they will secure the qualifications that they want, and hopefully they'll come back to our community as helpful and active citizens.
Wait, I'll get right to reply. You asked all the panel to comment, right?
Okay.
You finished it? Yeah. Right, Tony?
Well, I have to concur with what Dick has said, and we have to remember that this process, the council was dragged into it by the Scottish Government.
No, they opted into it.
Well, they were dragged into it. And therefore the SN, this gentleman at the end here says they'll review the process. The SNP government could stop this process tomorrow. Mike Russell could say, okay, I've had enough, that's it, stop. But they won't, because that's not the way they do things. Now, in terms of what should happen, I firmly believe that we should look at a whole new way of assessing whether a school is important to a community, whether a school should be kept open. And I'm going to suggest that the way that it should be done is that it should involve the whole community. It should involve the community councils, and maybe empowering the community councils to hold a ballot in the community, so that not only the staff, the parents, but the whole damn community gets a chance to say yes or no. And I would like to see that taken forward, and I will be pushing for that. I get onto the council. I think it's a good way of doing it. It empowers the whole community. It doesn't cost a huge amount of money. You don't pay community councillors. I know that because I'm on a community council. But I think it then involves the whole community. And certainly as regards the shared campus, it should not go ahead without the full and final approval of the communities, of the staff, and of the parents. And that is my suggestion.
Okay, Nick, back to the Nick.
We live in a weird and wonderful world. You can't get money off the Scottish Government for new ferries, but they want to pay money against the wishes of the parents for new schools. 9 million, you said 60%, 6 million from the council. Why do we not have a situation where we have a planning for real exercise, we get some of the people in to sit down with the parents and those parents that are going to have children going to these schools to discuss what is needed to improve the schools to make them fit for purpose? Because I don't think the solution is going to be a big mega joint campus, because that's been dreamt up by some bureaucrat who thinks there's going to be economies of scale by having one super campus in the future. We need to have people listening to what the parents are saying and working with them before getting the money committed from the Scottish Government. It's the wrong way round, isn't it? You sit down and discuss with the parents first, then you put the proposal forward. We've got to go back to the drawing board. We've got to say to the Cabinet Secretary for Education, who also happens to be our very own MSP, we want the money put on hold until we're ready to use it. We don't want that going anywhere else. And I think we need to get that commitment from Mike Russell now, and I think you're the man to get it. You ask him now for it, Mike, and he'll say yes.
We don't have to, we have that commitment.
Oh, right.
We have it already.
Well, that's not what Councillor Walsh has just said. You have just said that if this proposal doesn't go ahead, the money is not guaranteed. The money is not going to the schools. The 6 million is not available unless it is directly linked to this and this only proposal. Nothing else is on the table, and yet you're saying the money is there. Well, if there was a plan.
Could I just clarify that point? I mean, I don't have the information that Mike has to confirm that that will be the case. Mike Russell, the Cabinet Secretary for Education, has not come to me as leader of Argyll and Bute to say, don't worry about this, Dick. If the parents don't want the school to go ahead, the money will still remain there. That gives me a lot of comfort, that information.
Sorry, why haven't you asked that then?
Pardon?
Why haven't you asked that then?
Because our understanding was quite clearly that we were part of a process that was put in place by the government, not just involving the council or indeed the civil servants or the politicians, the Scottish Government, but it involves a whole raft of agencies and organisations that are part of the Schools for the Future initiative. And we've been part of that process. We've been invited to bid for it. It was suggested that a joint campus would be the way forward. Scottish Government signed up to it on the basis of that information. You know, as I sit here, there are 36 elected councillors on Argyll and Bute Council. Since 2009, based on the information I'm giving you here, it has been unanimously agreed. As recently as last Thursday at the Council's Executive Committee, we approved recommendations in a report, and there was no opposition to that based on the advice from government. So if Mike's telling us tonight not to worry, if you don't go ahead with the shared campus, then the monies that are on the table will remain on the table to enable you to develop a traditional school. I have comfort, I'm relaxed about it. What we need to agree on...
You're lucky you're not a parent, because I don't have comfort and I'm not relaxed about it, and I've had 2.5 years of this worry, and my children have too.
And my apologies for that.
Well,
my apologies for that. I think what we need to
right
do as a community, is ensure that we get something positive done to improve the teaching and learning environment of our
That would involve you listening to people, though.
The best way to do that would be to
Can you speak to the chair, please? Right, okay, this lady up there has been putting her hand up.
We're not stupid. We understand there's money problems, there's issues, we're seeing that and I think the councillors at the moment would say they've consulted with parents, they've consulted with the community, and if that comes down to small adverts in the paper advertising meetings at times which don't suit working parents full-time.
Hearing what you're saying here, that the process has been put in place that involve the Champions Group.
The Champions Group consists of 2 parents.
Sorry, could you let Dick finish, please?
In good faith, what's happened is that we have developed a process that includes a Champions Group. Now, if there are members of the Champions Group not attending the meetings,
it's not. Each establishment was to provide 3 teachers, 3 support staff, 2 parents, and 2 children.
Yeah, well,
and
so
while the teachers
that's
were
6
out of
parents.
school attending these meetings,
well,
our children were being taught by supply teachers, who quite frankly are coming back in from retirement and are not of the calibre you might be wanting.
Well,
I don't think Dick's finished. Could you just let Dick finish, please?
As I say, we've put in place a process in good faith that involved the Champions Group as well as other arrangements to take the detail of the project forward. What we agreed last Thursday was to continue the ongoing dialogue before we commit any monies to the project, because what we need to do is provide a preliminary design so that parents that are perhaps supportive, or members of staff that are perhaps supportive, they can have something by which to judge not proceeding against. And I have no issues with any of that. I think we need to do that so that parents can have a proper choice in the whole process. I'm not pushing through a shared campus, by the way. I'm listening very carefully. No decisions have been taken. There would be no, in terms of the plans, no financial close in this until August 2013. And I'm fairly realistic about this. If, for example, there's a groundswell of public opinion against it, then we'll kill it. But we need to get an alternative.
It's when you're prepared to listen to the public opinion.
Well, sorry, can I just... This lady made a very good question. She's asking about how the consultation would take place. How would people listen? What device should be in operation? Now, I think Tony's more or less covered it by saying he said all the consultation.
We still don't have an answer. The consultation has not consisted of a counsellor who's involved in the decision-making process, standing in front of a group of parents and answering questions. I knew as much as Fraser Harper, with no disrespect to Fraser Harper who dealt with the PAC process, I knew as much as he did about the whole proposal. He couldn't answer a single question. All he did was collate the information and pass it on. There has been nobody. This is the first opportunity that we have had to come face to face with a counsellor who can actually answer a question, although you're not really answering.
This lady's asking me about the consultation. What consultation would
process again? We are where we are with this, and I think we need to remember that we are, I suspect, all agreed that we want to improve the schools in the area physically, because they are pretty poor. But what we're saying we'll do is we'll review it, we'll consider the options, and we'll put it out to a vote. Now, Tony has made a wider suggestion, which is that it involves the whole community. That may very well be feasible.
It affects the whole community.
Yes, well it does. So all I'm saying is that we would come out with a range of options, costed, and ask people to give a view on it.
If you haven't explained how you're going to do this,
how would you do that?
Well, that's one of the reasons why it would go out to the parents and the teaching staff of the school. It would go out with a detailed analysis of what the options are and what the costs were.
So would the meetings be during the day or at night?
No, it would go out by post to everybody involved, and we would set out what we'd found out on the facts and figures. And as I said earlier, it may be that at the end of the day, the recommendation might still be for the joint campus. I do not know.
When would that be though? Because we are very nearly 2.5 years down the line since we got the first letter. It was December 2009 when we got the first letter telling us about this, and we are still no further forward.
Okay, well, if we form an administration in the council in May, then it will be one of, I'm saying it will be done immediately. My guess is it would take between 3 and 6 months to carry out a review properly. What I have an assurance is that that will not affect the money. And at the end of that time, all the facts and figures will be provided to everybody. During the process of establishing what the facts are, we'll try and make sure that everybody's fully informed about it. I think there has been a deficit in information to people. There's little doubt about that. And that's why it's hard to start from where everybody is. Everybody's suspicious about it. But what you have to understand is that we need to do something about the 3 schools. They're dire.
Well, the council are responsible for the 3 schools, so the council have allowed the 3 schools to fall into the state of disrepair that they're in.
St Mun's has been deemed acceptable. St Mun's is acceptable. Your own Argyll and Bute correspondence and analysis. It's the other 2. St Mun's is in an acceptable condition. So don't say it's the 2. It's just the 2.
Right. Could Mick?
Yeah, I'm actually hugely relieved to hear tonight that the money is guaranteed, because that basically means we can go back to square one and we can revisit the whole issue. And my view, therefore, is that we ought to ask the Cabinet Secretary for Education, who's not far away, to provide some funds for a support worker to work with the parents of the children at these schools and of the parents of the future children that are going to be at these schools, because there will be some coming through the mill. We need to be aware of what the demographics are and the demand are for the different schools, because there may well be an increase in that regard. And then I think that we do need to do a planning exercise involving all of those people about what is needed for the future in those schools, whether there is a need for new classrooms or new facilities, what the current state of those schools are in need in terms of repair and so forth. And my view is that we ought not to go for brand new super campuses when, as far as I can see, except for the Dunoon school, which I think is in some serious difficulty physically, where my view is that the existing schools can be improved to make them fit for purpose, and I would have thought that's what parents want. But if parents come up with something else, I would want them back then. If we don't put them at the centre of it, we're not going to get anywhere.
So this gentleman Phillips has been trying to come in or whatever.
There's just 2 very closely related points to this I wanted to ask. One is really been covered, but the question is, why have the present schools not been properly maintained on an ongoing basis over the years? I run a place, I've got a lot of buildings to look after. It's a daily question to me. All this maintenance, it's needed in all buildings, especially big buildings. And the other point is, there's been a proposal put forward for this joint campus. Why is there only one proposal in one location being put forward? It's been talked about, it must be this location apparently, and as I understand it, within the new building would be a segregated area, which a lot of people are very uncomfortable about. Why is that the only proposal? It's like you said to the folks of Dunoon, take it or leave it. It's got to be this or nothing. That's the way it's come out. And it sounded then, you're saying to us, take it or leave it. It's going to be outside Dunoon in a very inappropriate location, which would involve lots of young children having a long walk to school, or much more likely being driven to school, because they couldn't cross Argyll Street, I don't think. And why is there not an alternative? Within Dunoon, and let's say 2 things, within Dunoon and without a segregated area within it. And I think the least that should have been done, if you're talking about a new building, would be to talk about those issues and have an alternative proposal, not say to people it must be this location, particularly outside Dunoon.
Other sites were looked at and were discounted for a variety of reasons and for reasons of advice. And the current school site was the one that was eventually agreed because of its proximity to the recreational and sports facilities at the end of the day. What was your other point there, Phil?
Sorry, that point, I mean, I understand there are sites within, there must be sites within Dunoon.
Number of sites.
Just one other thing, because obviously I work in tourism. There's extreme anxiety, as I understand it, with the cow gathering folks about the problems that site could cause to them. So there's a lot of problems with the site. I mean, serious problems that we don't have at present. So in a sense, you would cause a lot more new problems, right, in my view, with this new campus.
I'm not aware of the concerns with cow gathering. We've in regular meetings. We've had regular meetings with cow gathering. The only issue they needed clarification on was, and I'm not defending, I mean, at the end of the day, there's no final decision. We've come with a blank sheet of paper. If we'd come with a clear proposal, then you would have said it was a fait accompli. What we are trying to do is to take the community with us as part of this particular project, so there is no final decision on this one. The question about, there's been dialogue with Cow Games. We have a partnership arrangement, we have a service level agreement with them, we work very closely with them, and they're fairly clear. There was a misunderstanding, I think, at the beginning of this whole process. In any discussions that I've been involved with, I have never once been advised on segregation. And I don't know where this has come from.
Just on that point, it's understood now, I hope this is wrong, but the understanding, I think, in the town is there will be a segregated areas for the present St Mun's pupils. There's different staff, different classrooms, I think that's right, and different uniforms. Is that not correct?
Well, I haven't heard that.
Just a minute, he's asking a question.
We've had discussions with the diocese, and there's no question of segregation. One of the issues in relation to the project is obviously in the numbers of children in the area and managing the process in terms of accesses, etc. and that. We haven't even got to the stage of discussing, because questions were asked, what would the meal breaks be, what would the uniforms. I've not been involved in any discussion in relation to that. There's been absolutely no agreement on any of that, and there's certainly been no request from the diocese for extra education. The only issue that we have to recognise here is that the council is required by law to provide denominational education. That is the only stipulation.
If you read your own PAC report, then it does say that they will have separate signage, a separate identity. They will obviously share facilities like the lunch hall and what have you, but it does quite clearly say in your own PAC report, where the issue has been raised as one of the comments, you do identify that there is a separate identity and separate signage. So maybe you want to have a look at that.
Yeah, I've read it.
Can I just sort of explain a vested interest? I'm in charge of the Ceilidh tent at the Cow Gathering, and also in charge of the new Ceilidh dance. And I don't understand Dick's point, because my understanding of the Cow Gathering is they're very concerned about it. And I think a misunderstanding is a strange word to use.
It's quite clear in the plan
my understanding of the Cow Gathering, I know Malcolm Barkley and I deal with it very closely. He is very concerned about the loss of the top field, which he said would jeopardise Cow Games. And he said there is no alternative as far as he's concerned. And if he doesn't have the top field, which will be used for the games, the Cow Games is in jeopardy. Now, Dick, could you come back?
No, that's fair. Clearly, we met with the Cow Gathering Board recently this afternoon.
I know that.
And the main issue concerning the Cow Gathering is the period when the works are being constructed. The question about the school and when will the recreational fields be developed, because it's at that point that they were worried because of the demands from the RSPB. But we gave them comfort as to how that could be accommodated. It's about both of us working on a contingency if and when the plans were to proceed. But as I said before, we're a long way away from any of that, and there would have been clear dialogue and consultation with parents before we even got to that stage.
Okay.
See this clear dialogue with parents? Yeah. The only clear dialogue I've had is from Lindsay. I've had nothing else. The only bit of the paper I ever saw about this campus was about Cow Gathering being upset about it. The point the gentleman made back there, which you'd asked about, was this has been 2.5 years to this point, and we still don't have anything underway, under plans, whether we're for it or against it. But as you said now, Dunoon Primary School is in such disrepair, it's unbelievable. Current Primary is not far behind it. Like you said, why were they not maintained? You wouldn't leave your house to go in that disrepair, but you're leaving our children in those buildings going into disrepair, and now you're saying, well, this is the only option. And you can't say that's not happening, because there's teachers in Current Primary, when I took my daughter up there to be shown around the school, who said, it is not an option to have the building repaired, we must have a joint campus. Teachers are saying that. And as for the local community not knowing, my dad stays in Argyll Crescent, and until I told him about this, he had no idea.
Yeah, well, it's not the case we must have a shared campus. The schools have been significantly invested in over the years. Dunoon Primary, for example, it's a significant spend on its roof. The problem is that because of the nature of the building, you can spend a significant amount of money and it not be seen. There was a survey carried out on all of the school's education property, and it concluded that the Dunoon Primary School and Kim Primary School were in poor condition, and action needed to be taken on that. Now, I fully accept that the council has not been investing in the way that it should and it could. It's well known the restrictions that we operate in terms of available finances. 80 plus primary schools, it is not appreciated the geography of Argyll and Bute and the multiplicity of service requirements and the cost to fund that multiplicity. That's what we've been wrestling and we've been moving. Just, it's no different than your household budget. You move money from here to fund that, and then you move money back to fund that. When we were funding schools and ring fencing schools and accommodating the NPDO project, something had to give, and that is unfortunately the situation that we face. We made it perfectly clear as part of the service review, we would ring fence the quality provision of the education service. We're now talking about the education school estate. That's where the whole question of capacity and multiplicity of schools and all of that comes in, and the problem of resources. But please be assured, it's not my intention to drive forward the shared campus. I'm making it perfectly clear. And we had a meeting in the hall, at the Queen's Hall, 600 people attended about the ferries. If the people don't want the project to go ahead, we will not ignore that.
Would you try to join council in secondary school?
One at a time, so this lady in the back we tried to come in for ages. Right.
Okay. I did.
Elected members, and I was not aware of that aspect of it. But the one thing I think we need to do is to get this resolved fairly quickly. So, I mean, I'm listening to what people are saying, and I'm clear that if the community don't want it, it will not happen. But we need to agree what it is we're going to do.
Hold your meeting.
Hold the meeting.
I challenge you to hold your meeting.
There'll be plenty
Advertising.
What kind of meeting are you?
A public
No, wait a minute, let her answer.
The parents can turn up and Councillor Walsh can see what the opposition is, because he said if the people don't want it, they won't get it. If you don't want to hold a meeting, put a wee questionnaire out to every parent, as one of the other candidates suggested, and see what your response is.
We can do a number of things that we can do.
Well, do them. Do them though.
If you don't find out what kind of opposition, if you don't make an effort to find out what kind of opposition you have, how can you say, oh, if there's opposition, we won't proceed? How are you going to gauge whether or not there is opposition if you don't directly ballot each parent or have a public meeting?
Well, we've discussed
No
possible,
opposition if you're looking in the other direction.
we've discussed possible ways of doing that.
But you've been proceeding for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
At what point are you going to go, oh now wait a minute, do the parents actually want this?
You've never asked us, sorry to interrupt, but when you did the mega campus a few years ago, right? And you were going to do I still got this, I said at the time, why is the biggest town in the Highlands going to have the biggest school in the Highlands? And it's still the same now with the primary school. We're going to have the biggest primary school in the Highlands, arguably one of the top 5 biggest schools in the whole of Scotland. And we had a meeting, and we all went to the meeting in the Queen's Hall, and yourself, Mr Walsh, the engineers, the surveyors, all these things, they had a map and they had a model at the back with some of my kids at school, because I said and some of us, where's the scale on this? And you went, oh, there's no scale. I've got kids doing standard grade that could put a scale on a map. These folk at the time, because 700 people approximately turned up that night, the people on the panel on the stage were white, yourself included, you were white. You just looked and you did not realise, and yet you at the end said, I take it you don't want this. The whole place cheered, clapped, stamped their feet. That's the sort of meeting we're asking for. That sort of meeting in the Queen's Hall, not a small hall as I appreciate tonight. You're quite right, and thank you for organising this, that this was you could get. But the Queen's Hall is at Dunoon Hall, that's where it should be. And it's for, and you're quite right, by the way, Tony, saying it should be for everybody, because it's not just about parents. It's about the West End of Dunoon, it's about Kiln, and it's about communities. And your primary school is the heart of your community. And if that goes in the West End of Dunoon, or if kids had to come to the West End, that's another alternative, that would end. Because at the moment you're proposing putting 700 kids where there's already 1,000 kids, okay, in an area where they built houses when they thought working class people wouldn't have cars. Now if anyone has been to Arden Slate, you know. If anyone's done the school run to the grammar school, you know what it's like in the morning. God forbid my wife is taking, because I work on the other side, is taking my 2 sons to the grammar and my 2 daughters to the primary. Unbelievable.
The only support that I've heard in being out and about has actually been from the janitors in the school. And that's certainly the basis that they realise how poor some of the schools are. But I've heard no support whatsoever for the current proposal. None.
Well, I've certainly heard from the community around Arden Slate and Dixon Avenue who say that already it's very difficult in the mornings when there's traffic going to the grammar school, particularly when there's bad weather. And they're saying, are they going to be completely locked in when there's a new campus base just adjoining? And they're very concerned about that.
Sorry.
Unfortunately, I'm in the right circle, so I haven't personally heard anything except from my daughter, whose children go to school here. So I think the whole that encompasses the whole thing then. That there must be more dialogue, lots more dialogue, and it must be much more focused, and it must be a two-way interaction between all the parties involved and the community. That's
And has Mr. Walsh had any support? Have you had any
No,
support?
if I was being honest, no one has crossed the street to say to me that they...
Could we sort of wind up this education?
Okay, you say that nothing's been decided, but the time scale that we were given states that Cairn will be demolished in 2013.
Yes.
That's next year. Yes, it's here. It's in black and white. It's in your paperwork. We're talking next year. You're knocking lumps out of Cairn School, and we know nothing. There's no information.
Please believe me, although what's been written there are no proposals to proceed with this.
It's like, why write it? Why can't answer the parents?
Other than agreeing to ongoing dialogue before any monies are committed to taking the project forward. There'll be clear consultation discussion long before we do anything, in particular demolishing Cairn Primary School.
Are you giving a commitment that you will hold a public meeting on this issue?
Yes, I'm quite happy.
As did Bruce Marshall last night.
Okay, sorry, so this gentleman first, then you.
Just have to remember that you might not be in. You might not win. So
well, yes.
Just remember that.
Yes, that's a good point.
Can I just request that when this meeting does come about that we have front page coverage on the local paper like you did have for your proposal to the new development that you'd like for the Pierside Queen's Hall. I was really disgusted to see that the Queen's Hall got a huge priority over the fact that this joint campus nobody knew anything about. There was a tiny wee bit in a planning section, and that was the reason I came about finding out about this proposal. So when you're inviting us all to attend this meeting, we have a lovely big front coverage of this proposed campus to say, come and share your opinions. We have all the plans here for you to
I don't think the
Dick Walsh doesn't run the paper, does he?
I was going to say that.